one of the problems that Meghan Markle had when she first joined the British monarchy was the fact that you could see that she could literally play Prince Harry like a fine old fiddle. I mean, he was desperate to please. And, when you saw him, he, as I say, he was a nice guy back in the day, and he was very, very agreeable. You couldn't meet a nicer person dealing with the public. He was very good, and particularly had that Diana charm of learning how to work the public, particularly not just the public, but children. They came to him, they liked him. He was kind of fun. And you understand that, right? This is what people are like. Now, what is interesting is when Meghan came on the scene, that was one thing that she really did not have a great connection with. She was very much sort of like, don't get near, don't mess my clothes, smear my makeup, that type of thing. Typical sort of starlet that doesn't really understand that really to connect with the public, you have to allow the public in. A lot of people criticised the late Queen, if you remember, because for many, many years into her reign, really until the end, that she always wore gloves. But this was a self-protective thing, and, I fully agree with her. This was because she was shaking numerous hands, she didn't want to pick up germs, and she didn't want to, say, do what the celebrities do, which is have lots of gels in their car, their limousines, and the minute they get in, they're wiping their hands furiously because they're concerned that they may have picked up germs from the, oh yes, you, the public. And Meghan Markle, as I said, she simply didn't have that connection. One of the problems that she also had was the fact that, if you remember, she claimed that she didn't know anything about Prince Harry. But of course, we know that's an absolute lie. Everybody in the world knew that Prince Harry was an eligible bachelor. I mean, I remember a TV show, I don't know if you remember this, a few years back now, and parts of it were actually shot in some of the studios that I was working in, called I Wanna Marry Harry. And if I remember this correctly, and I think it was a British co-production, that the producers, I remember saying, I couldn't believe that these girls allegedly believed this guy was Prince Harry, but apparently they did, right? So that was the thing, it was everywhere. But apparently Meghan had no idea who, Harry or indeed the royal family were, because it wasn't a big thing in America. I mean, it's just such a liar, right? But what the big thing was, which did turn out to be problematic, really, for Meghan Markle, was simply the fact that the narrative to push her own story once that she'd entered into the fray, and in particular, of course, wanting to see herself emulated as a true princess, that of course, the late and beautiful Diana, Princess of Wales. Well, Harry desperately wanted to believe that he'd found not only a soulmate, but somebody that could replicate that certain magic, that je ne sais quoi, as it were, that Diana had. Now, I would say that is very few and far between. There are very few and far between magical people. I'm sure you'll agree. People might not think this, but, when you look at, say, somebody like the movie star Marilyn Monroe, there truly was only one Marilyn Monroe. There was, for instance, only one Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp, who did so much to radicalize and do all sorts of stuff, change the perception of medicine. There are few and far between those people. You can't emulate them. They just come from natural life. And Diana was certainly one of those people. As I said, I met her on a number of occasions, and each time she presented slightly a different personality. Confirmed that, of course, by a good friend of mine, sadly, the late George Michael also. But here on today's show of By Royal Appointment, I wanted to share this with you about now what's emerging by the fact that that was another problem inside the very first setup of Harry and Meghan's foray, as it were, into the British monarchy. You see, he not only wanted people to believe that she was the sort of next, if you like, Princess Diana, and was very simple in the fact. And if you remember, and this is very important, this bit in the documentary piece, where he says, they came back from that royal tour and she did a terrific job and people couldn't believe how she was good at the job. Meanwhile, all of those staff were in pieces because allegedly there was tea being thrown around. She was storming around and couldn't believe that she wasn't being paid for certain aspects of that royal life. So again, blinkered, blind-eyed, blinded by love, whatever you want to call it, this was the world that Harry, of course, had now got himself into. Now, it's interesting to see, and as ever, I have to say allegedly, why, strangely enough, the woman that she admires so much, she hasn't exactly been able to dent that family. Yes, the Spencers. As ever, let me explain. As many people know who watch the show on a regular basis, I was lucky enough to meet the late and beautiful Princess Diana. And I disagree, in fact, with many people's sort of story about how Meghan doesn't have similar qualities to Princess Diana. And I know this might be controversial, right? Absolutely, 100%. You see, what I saw in Diana was very much, and you have to remember, this is a totally different age, right? This is the age of no social media, newspapers ruled, glossy magazines, although okay, National Enquirer was the thing. Gossip was just rife, and literally every single day there was a story about Diana, and a huge story, and she perpetuated a lot of them. People forget that she tipped off the media. She was friends with photographers. She wanted to see if she tried a new hairstyle, for instance, whether that was sitting with the public. What was it like? She played the media literally like a fine fiddle. I mean, there's no two ways. And that really would be the thing that I would say that, if Harry wants to say, do people see anything in Meghan that Diana had? That was it. Now people obviously, when people sadly pass away, want to paint everybody in this saint-like manner. Diana was very controversial, and as she got older she realised the power that she got. Remember, a very young girl when she got married. Later on in life she'd woken up and realised that actually she had this power, not only power, beauty, statuesque, model-like, and expected and normally got men to fall at her feet. She had numerous lovers, many that you don't know about, that many have been kept under wraps by the media for simple protection. But you see, Diana had this Marilyn Monroe-esque thing about her. Fascinating story about the late and beautiful Marilyn Monroe. And they said that, Marilyn had gone into the lodge in Las Vegas on one of her very final weekends alive to see, and was dating at the time, Frank Sinatra. And apparently she said, oh, who's in the other room? And they said, oh, the ladies, and they're doing a bingo game. This is true, a bingo game, right? And what was fascinating about this was that basically Marilyn said, oh, no men. And she said, no, there's no men, no. And she said, oh, that's good. And the conversation apparently turned around to the fact that this lady had to say to Marilyn, Marilyn, not every man in the universe is instantly going to fall for you. But by that point in her life, because she was Marilyn Monroe, she believed that, you see? And that's the same thing, truly, that had happened to Princess Diana. She knew that men became quivering wrecks in front of her simply because of her international fame. And yes, she was beautiful, but it was driven by that. And consequently, we've learned about Meghan that she always refers to the thing as heart attack beautiful. You know what I'm saying? Now, the difference that you have literally with Diana and Meghan is that I believe that if Diana had been alive today, she would have embraced the social media digital age as a way of getting back. That was very much her scene. But what was fascinating to find out, and as I say, I've interviewed, met and worked with many people who knew Diana well. One of the biggest things that Meghan was able to twist into the sort of equation regarding Prince Harry. As we all know, that terrible situation with Martin Bashir, which I've said to you before, is absolutely disgusting, that he is not brought to any kind of level of justice. The way that he played with this young woman's mind at a very vulnerable point. We can't forget that. She was very, very disorientated, worried about all sorts of things. And there's this guy throwing in even more problems. Camilla said this, Charles said that, William's got a spy watch and stuff. I mean, truly, truly awful things to do to somebody, particularly when they are that vulnerable. However, you see, basically, as we know, Diana didn't want anything to do with Oprah Winfrey. You see, the reason why she didn't like Oprah Winfrey is not what's reasoned in the media, is apparently from an excellent source. She just felt there was a bad vibe about her. She wasn't the sort of person that apparently, Diana thought she could tell her story to. Even though they'd had lunch at Kensington Palace and stuff like that, that was the point where she realised this is not for me. And consequently, she realised that by going to an American tabloid could be quite damaging to the monarchy, as if it wasn't bad enough going to the BBC. The reason why she picked the BBC was that they said to her, we'll give you full control. A lot of people don't know is they didn't give her full control at the end either. So she was duped again, used and abused is the bigger question. However, Meghan was very clever because she said, well, basically, if we do our interview, and as ever, I have to say, allegedly, with Oprah Winfrey, we can finally set the rights, wrongs, etc., that your mother would have been given the opportunity to do had she have sat down. And that really was the narrative that was spun through. Incredible when you think. I mean, I'm not shocked by it because I work in the world of show business. These people will say anything to get what they want. Oprah Winfrey saw mega ratings, no two ways about that. And on top of all of that, you know, she was able to say, if only, you know, I was able to have put your mother's story across in a far better positive light. And maybe, in fairness, she could have done. You know, now we know in hindsight what Martin Bashir was doing. But there were bigger problems literally behind the scenes, as I say. You see, Meghan Markle basically has now said to His Majesty the King, senior members of the British monarchy, the Prince and Princess of Wales, she's not bringing her children because it's not security. And also, let's not forget, Meghan desperately wanted that apology. That's what she really, truly, 100% wanted, right? She wanted the apology. But she didn't get that. Now, where this gets interesting is Charles Spencer came to the rescue as a knight in shining armour and basically threw open his house and said, you know, that Harry could stay there, that Meghan could stay there, and, you know, this would be a safe haven. This is Althorp, of course, up in Northamptonshire, a wonderful venue, expertly run, you know, by Charles Spencer. And, you know, he, I would honestly say, has learned the lessons from the past. If you read his book about the terrible time that he had at school and things like that, you know, he is an open book. He's very like Diana in many respects, wears his heart on his sleeve. As I say, I've been lucky enough to meet him on a number of occasions now. Nice chap, whatever you think. The personal stuff, he would again be the first to admit, not great at it. But don't we all make mistakes? You know, you have to judge a person on the way that you see it. Now, obviously, there's family feuds in that side of the family. What family isn't? But when you say, well, I can offer you the safe haven that you really require, why did Meghan turn it down? Many people were shocked to find that Diana's sisters had in fact been over to Montecito, and there were certain levels of communication that, you know, were not obviously for other members of the senior monarchy. And that's really quite sad, but I understand Harry's, that's his, you know, what he wants to do and that's how he wants to portray it, that sort of thing. But what's interesting is, again, you know, that really what they're saying, even to the Spencer family, is if you want to come and see, you know, the grandchildren as such, then you have to come over here. And that's really like Meghan ruling, isn't it? You know, I'm not coming to you, but you can come to me. Now, remember, Harry very, you know, nice gesture at the very start of their relationship, took Meghan to his mother's grave. And apparently Meghan threw herself on the grave, both hands down, and apparently was silently praying and asking for guidance. Guidance for what? You know, you've got a prince, you know, it's all happiness. The sad thing is that his mother wasn't there to see this moment. And maybe that moment wouldn't have happened if the mother had been there. You know, let's be brutally honest about that. And that's, you know, the story. Now, as I said, Meghan was given the wonderful opportunity of being able to spend time at Althorp. And it's great because it really is secure and away from the media. Now, Charles himself would say that he made a huge mistake in not allowing his sister to come and stay when she requested in her hour of need. But again, I would put it to you on this, both sides of it. A totally different time. You know, the paparazzi at that point, you know, we're talking middle 90s, completely unruly. Did exactly what they wanted to get things and do what they want, all that sort of stuff. I'm not defending him, but what I'm saying is, you know, you had to have lived through that time to understand just how abrasive the whole thing was. It's totally different now. You know, accessibility is totally different with like Meghan posting things on Instagram, etc. You know, now where I find this fascinating, in my opinion, is the simple fact that, you know, if she wanted to bring the children over, they could privately come over here without all the hullabaloo, of course, of the Heathrow, the, you know, whatever, private airfields, helicopter to Althorp. Everything would be done for them alongside offering them very, you know, clever protection inside the house. There's one reason why Meghan doesn't want that. She wants to be near the action. If she's coming, this is a showmanship. This is me returning because you've requested it. It's not good enough that Charles Spencer's offering this. No, no, no. She wants this from His Majesty the King. No, it's no good, you know, of course, the brother of Harry's mother offering that. That's not big enough. No, no, no. Meghan's holding out. And also, as a source pointed out to me, these children may never actually return until perhaps they're in their teenage years, maybe even later. And the true story about that is that Meghan really just doesn't want to come back. Now, as one can imagine, this has slightly perplexed Charles Spencer because, as I say, nice, affable guy, probably leave them to it, doesn't want to live with them and all that sort of stuff, just offering that sort of, sanctuary that apparently Harry and Meghan claim that they need. Now, again, where this gets really interesting, in my opinion, is the fact that, well, Meghan's holding out for that big apology, which basically means in the long term that nothing's going to happen. But I can tell you that also Meghan herself is not exactly 100% enamoured with the Spencer family, and as ever, you have to say allegedly. You see, Meghan literally lost all sight of reasoning, some people might say, when she found out that the late, and in my opinion, brilliant Duke of Edinburgh cited that he gave her the moniker nickname, of course, of DOW, Duchess of Windsor. This was because, according to him, she had those traits of Wallis Simpson, didn't exactly fit the remit, you get the picture. Now, moving forward, what was fascinating is that, Harry, had gone round telling everybody that the woman that he was about to marry sort of emulated his late mother. Now, with all the kindness in the world, when you're 12 years old, your memories of your mom are slightly different, Obviously, you love them to pieces and everything, but they're your protector, your saviour, the one that you turn to for every comfort and everything like that. Your dad is the sort of stalwart person that you think, I hope to be like him one day, that sort of thing. That's what, parents are about. They give you the balance, right? And while Harry saw Diana in Meghan on a much larger scale than anybody else, this could be, of course, given the fact that she continually dressed like his late mother. There are numerous pictures of Meghan literally emulating looks, whether it be magazine covers, casual day wear, casual outings with Harry. And it is said, of course, that on their very first date, she managed to spray on the perfume that the late Princess Diana wore, which that would have created so many emotions. I mean, no two ways about it. Of course, truly, people will never know. What we would know is that Meghan has continually lied about knowing anything about Prince Harry because, according to her friends and associates that worked with her literally behind the scenes on various shows, including Suits, she was Diana obsessed, loved every single thing, and apparently cited the book, Her True Story, as one of her all-time favourite reads. It has numerous mentions of Harry. Right, so how come you didn't know anything about him? Now, I understand that you might not know the in-depth story of the British monarchy, but to say you didn't know about one of the most famous eligible bachelors is just ridiculous. And given the fact that clearly she wanted the world to believe this story, it becomes farcical in itself. Now, apparently Harry was slightly miffed when other people inside the family, and I have this from excellent authority, didn't see what Harry saw in his wife, particularly in the Spencer clan. See, Harry was very influenced by the Spencers, as you can imagine, and rightly so. There is bloodline, there is family, and if you recall at that now very sad funeral for the late Princess Diana, forget the walk-in, when Charles Spencer got on, of course, and gave his speech in his memory of course, of his sister, he pointed out that they were her blood family. And everyone applauded. Well, everyone apart from Her Majesty the Queen. And rightly so, she should remain impartial, whichever way. Many people saw this as a cheap shot, but let's not forget, families are very fractious. And the story that I would tell you is the fact that, the bottom line was that Diana could have stayed at any royal palaces for his continuation as long as she wanted. Her Majesty the Queen was more than accommodating in wanting to get Diana's life back on track. She had a really soft spot for her. She knew that Diana was young when she married, as was the Queen. Different generations, different times, but, speaking to people, including staff that worked for the late Princess Margaret, who said, Margaret, quite, feisty and all that sort of stuff, did like Diana because she liked the fact that she was a different character, as it were, She kind of saw sort of the rebellious princess inside Diana again. But of course, Harry, along with Meghan, and Meghan sensing Harry's unique vulnerability regarding his late mother, well, she decided, obviously, to emulate certain pieces and looks. And we've seen this over the years numerous times. What a lot of people don't fail to realise, and I think this is rather unkind, is that we have Prince William. He equally, albeit a couple of years older, went through the very difficult things that happen to many people across the world without that luxury structure that these two individuals had. But William has crafted himself to be a fine man, whichever way you look at it. You know, he's met a very strong, independent woman who is his support, his rock, for want of a better word, and doesn't want to outshine or whatever. They work as a team. You know, that's what William wanted for his younger brother Harry. He knew the vulnerabilities, as did Catherine. You know, Catherine knew Harry's mental state for a long time, and he and her got on very well until the arrival of Meghan. In fact, too much, because, you know, apparently Meghan, according to a source, didn't like the fact that they were giggling together over certain things, or just got on because they'd had a bond for many years, you know. Meghan solely wanted Harry to herself. Now, the other situation is this, and this is again where it's fascinating with the Spencer clan. You see, Meghan could have had anything she wanted from that side of the family. Charles was very much wanting to, you know, offer his hospitality. He has that, you know, everything that you could possibly want. But again, there's a reluctance because, as I said, once apparently that she could not, or the family couldn't see this resemblance inside Meghan Markle for the late Diana, which is preposterous to say to anybody to make them believe that. Well, then Meghan sort of lost all interest. And consequently, you'll note there's no ever reference to that family. I mean, nothing new there. There's no reference to her own family. And of course, the mother who mysteriously disappeared for years on end for her own father. When you look at the mood board, where's that now? You know, there's no reference to any family. It's the sole focus on Meghan Markle. And Harry's got a dilemma, you see, because he knows that this would be the one solution that could work very well for them. There they could go and stay literally with real family. But according to a source, Meghan's not having it, doesn't want it, and it's not happening. And the bottom line with all of this is, unless Meghan agrees, then Harry can't do anything regards his own children. He's literally that trapped. Now, the only way around this, apparently, is the fact that suddenly Charles and Diana's sisters must suddenly have this light bulb moment where they're suddenly seeing this wonderful apparition of Diana reincarnated. And apparently everything would be right. This is the problem when you work with a narcissist, allegedly. You have to give them everything that they want. And if you don't, then they just hold back until you eventually crumble, or they will walk away. It's as simple as that. Another big problem that Meghan has, literally, in my opinion, with the Spencer family is the fact that, you know, when she gave that Oprah Winfrey interview, if you remember that, well, she was kind of expecting a lot of support, according to sources, from the family. Not from the royals, but she would have liked that. She would have liked somebody to come out and say, we didn't realise you'd suffered so much. Oh dear, Meghan, what can we do? Let's bend over backwards. But she did kind of think, and I think this was perpetuated and pushed down again into the earlobes of Prince Harry as to, well, why hasn't any of the family come out and said, this was a terrific interview, we're nice to see that there's a balance, they've got both sides of their story. So again, you know, you're crossing the wrong person. And what you're seeing here, this is again fascinating when you dig a little bit deeper, is obviously, you know, Harry, as I said, is at a crossroads in his life now, because what you're looking at is literally the abyss. You have no one in your life other than the woman that you've given everything up for. I mean, everything. So you've walked away from, you know, your brother, your father, your stepmother, who you got on well with. You know I have seen the facts that you get on, unless you're a terrible actor who literally despised these particular individuals for years. You got on incredibly well. And suddenly somebody changed that direction. Now, things could have been a lot better, of course, because as we all know, Meghan decided that she wanted to be top cheese, the big cheese, and that really was going to be all about one thing, making sure that she and the Queen became besties. She figured that, you know, if Charles, he'd walked her down the aisle now, so, you know, that was enough. They've moved on at this point. The number one target was the Queen. And the reason for this, and this is where this gets particularly interesting in the story, is that Meghan thought they could bypass the Prince and Princess of Wales, which then, of course, were the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Popularity at that point was totally different. Meghan saw that her star was rising. She's new blood, she's interesting, magazine covers, etc. And as I pointed out in a previous interview, What was interesting, I found, was the fact that Meghan cites the fact that she managed to elevate, Catherine's style, the way that she did her makeup, for instance, funkier clothes, etc. I would disagree with that, not because I'm a fan of Catherine, but because I just think women evolve. You find a style in different generations. Don't tell me off, ladies, but you know what I mean. What you wore in your 20s, you're not going to wear in your 30s. You know what I mean. And of course, you've got access to these wonderful stylists, and you think, yes, is this a better look now? For instance, the eyeliner that, of course, Catherine used to wear has long since been banished because, while her mother likes it, and still, that's of a generation, Catherine knows it isn't the right look. So you see a softer look in Catherine's makeup. Apparently, that's all down to Meghan. And she should be grateful that she showed her some Hollywood secrets. I don't remember those two bonding or hearing about bonding over that. You get the picture. But this is how it works. Meghan just wants validation for everything. Now, again, as I pointed out, the bottom line is that really they're in this massive dilemma because they can't say they can't come back here for security. They've been offered security. Charles and Charles Spencer have a very cordial relationship now. Everybody's grown up, everybody's moved on. There's only one person that hasn't, and that is Meghan Markle, and she knows that this is her value. Now, what she believes and what we've seen over the last few days is that, she can dangle those children, Harry's children, for as much as she wants. She can say, you're not having this until I get what I want. But the bigger picture really is she's opening herself up to being an absolute fraud. Because if she and Harry truly wanted to have the security, the opportunity to say, come over here and spend 2 or 3 weeks in the summer in the gilded security of a wonderful stately home connected with his late mother, and maybe just relive some memories, maybe sit round and have drinks in the garden on a beautiful balmy summer's day and find out a little bit more about your husband and the life of his late mother. It's all there to be explored. But of course, that's not about one thing, is it? It's not about Meghan. She's too busy, let's be blunt, trying to flog jams, shortbread cookies, and anything else, trying to keep her profile high. She's not interested in anything to do with anybody else. That's the real deal. If she was, she would have taken time out to literally even go out with Harry and find out, where did Diana go? But the thing is, she already knows all of that, because she did a deep dive into Diana right at the beginning, hence the reason she was able to become the Duchess of Sussex. She owes Diana a lot, not just because of the respect of her memory, but for the fact that really, without Diana, truly, she wouldn't have the life she has today. And in the darkest moments of her life, maybe just going to sleep at night, Meghan Markle must, of course, thank the day that she suddenly found somebody that she decided was going to be an idol. But even she could not have thought into the future just how much Diana would give her access to the life, as she said, I didn't always live like this. You didn't until you married a prince. As ever, thank you so much for taking the time out to join me, and I hope you enjoyed that, of course, by royal appointment. If you can, please do like and share. And as I say, I'm thinking of turning some of these into podcasts as well. So if you prefer to listen to it as a podcast, once I've worked all of that out, I will let you know. You know what it's like, chums. And please, as I say, take care of yourselves out there. Until next time, by royal appointment, Neil Sean, Kensington, London.